Welcome back to another edition of Root to Rising podcast I'm your host, Christine Hummel, and I'm privileged again with another special guest. Was with me today, Kam, who will talk to us a little bit about her personal and professional journey. Kam has an interesting spin on things, taking characteristics and skill sets that she has had throughout her career and changing across different industries. So we're very excited to have Kam on the show today. And Kam, I'm going to throw it to you to introduce yourself and your personal brand.
Thank you, Christine. I'm honored to be here. So I've learned so much from your previous guests and the great conversations that you had. I thought I might start with my interesting accent. So I was born and raised in Sydney, Australia, but I've called Boston home for like 15 years now, I guess, in total. And my husband and I are proud parents to 3 adult children now. That's Liam, Katie, and Max, and our Australian Labrador fur baby called Wookie. I thought I might start with a couple of fun facts. I'm not a morning person. I'm truly a night owl. I love baking and cooking with my spare time. And that's usually weekends or if I'm blessed not to be traveling during the week as well. But that's kind of my decompress time from work. The beach is my happy place for sure. And I would say that my professional passion is mentoring and coaching women. So as for my brand, I'm passionate about people and people leadership. I think leadership is really a privilege and not a rite of passage. And as you move up in your career, and I think too many people think that it is. And I genuinely love to connect and engage and chat with people. So my high school teacher's nickname for me was Chatty Cathy, which is very appropriate. So although I go by Kam, my name is Kathy Ann. So Chatty Cathy it was. And I think any ability that you have to quickly connect with people is such a blessing, especially for someone like myself leading customer services organizations for most of my career. The total heart of getting the best from your talent is having that passion of caring about experiences. So both employee experiences and, of course, customer experiences. For me, happy employees, and I know this is not new, but happy employees make happy customers. I think the other element to my professional brand is that I'm really focused on creating strategies that ensure quick execution. And my core experience the past 15 years really has been on business and technical transformation. And, I'm currently the Chief Customer Officer at CDK Global.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And I love the personal tidbits about yourself. And now I'm going to only think of Chatty Cathy when I talk to you. Oh, that's awesome, though. I love that. So there's a lot here to talk about, but maybe we start, when you were in college, as we're trying to share stories here for other women to learn about people's experiences. When you were in college, what did you want to do? And then what was your first job out of college, and did you actually do it?
Yeah, so actually, I had always this passion to go into the media and entertainment industry. And initially, I really wanted to go into the engineering and technology side, which is what I studied at college, was back then, so a long time ago, television and film engineering. And so I actually did start my career out in media and entertainment in Australia, but on the production side. So although I had done this technical really stream, my first job was as an editor, a tape editor in news and current affairs at a television network. And so I was an editor for many years, tapping into that creative side, but underneath there was still this like thirst for technology. So really my career kind of was complete happenstance to where I am, the path I'm on today. So I was helping a friend out at the time, being his demo artist at a trade show in Amsterdam. And he wanted me to demo his software. And so I took vacation from my job to go and do that for him. And while I was there, a VP from a software company stopped by, and that was a company called Avid Technology, also in sort of film and television editing domain. And he gave me his card, and he said, and took my phone number and said, "I'll call you." And about a month later, I was offered by the head of the Australian New Zealand business to build customer support and training for them. So I left the creative job in the television network, and I immediately went to go and work for this software company, Avid. And that was really the start of me then leaning into the technical side of my personality and the first foray into building a very small customer services team. So, yeah, but probably the next couple of pieces are really the kind of the critical path as well. And that is that I was pregnant with my first son, Liam, and I decided to start my own consulting practice. So go into business, and it was specializing in transformation, but it's still in the media sector. And I ran that company for like 8 years, and it really was perfect for me because I got that the flexibility that I needed because I then subsequently had Caitlin and Max. And, it was 3 young children. I really enjoyed having the flexibility of my own business. But the biggest career milestone for me came when I was offered again by Avid. So 9 years later, nearly 9 years later, to go and live in Singapore and run their Asia Pac business. So at this point, my husband was at the peak of his career and his business, and we had 3 young kids, 2 businesses we were running. And my youngest, Max, was 2 at the time. And initially it was like, this is way too hard. We can't pack up our lives and move to Singapore.
So Cam, just to go back to your comment on, you had your first job out of college, but then you did a demo for someone that was kind of on your vacation that you did that. But why or what did you do during that demo that this person called you back to ask you for a full-time job? How did you show up to that demo for you to have the next step in your career in a very different area where you were not currently working in?
That's a great question. It was really my first time at a trade show doing a demo. So I didn't even know, I guess, what that needed to look like. And I think it was just my ability to connect really quickly with this VP, so to understand, what are you looking for? Here's the software. Here's how it can help. He asked some really good questions. Some I knew the answer to, but some I didn't. I was really helping a friend out doing this. So I don't know if I truly know what he saw. Although I could ask him, because I will tell you, I'm still connected with him today. So he is a lecturer and in business leadership. And so I could probably ask him that question, actually, if he can even
I'm sure
remember. It was so long ago.
he obviously saw something in you, and if it was your ability to connect with people, or when you did get a question that was asked that you didn't know the answer to, how you responded in that way, which again, it's not having to know all the answers, but how to respond, be professional, and follow through. But I guess, do you believe that the connection and the desire you have with people, do you think that's something that is innate within you, that you were born with? Or do you think that it is something that people learn based on their environments and their certain behaviors they're surrounded by?
I actually think it's innate. I found that even as a teenager, I would say I only had a small group of friends. So some people think, if you're outgoing and you can speak to anyone, that you have this vast friendship network. And that's not the case. I would say that
Agreed.
I hold, I can count on one hand my close friends. Certainly I have a lot of acquaintances. But when I get into a discussion, I'm just really interested in people's stories. So I think that for me, it is just innate. But I think, as a professional skill, it really is so important. You hear this often, but very few people really digest this, and that is listen. The more you stop to listen, actually, that's when you'll really get an understanding of the person, an understanding of the problem and the situation. And you will get your time to speak, of course. But that stopping and listening really is such a critical piece that you have to have in leadership. And I think just in general in your professional life.
I agree. And I think it's important to understand that certain people have innate characteristics that we maybe are just born with for whatever reason, right? Everyone's different. I have people on the show that I just had a chemical bioengineer. She had an innate love and passion for math and science, right? So sometimes you can't teach your passion or your motivators or things that naturally come easy to you. But we talk about on the show, how do you identify what those motivators are quickly in your career and then hopefully make a profession out of that, which sounds like you did so far, right? Focusing on the customer service area of what you do today. You definitely have this connection with people, you have this connection of listening, and that translates over to a skill set that you have a very robust professional journey. And let's maybe go back to that. So you have the job after you do the demo, you get offered a new job in a totally different space that
Yeah.
you went to college with. So tell us about what was next. What happened after that?
So what happened after that is that I was pregnant with my first child, so Liam, and I decided to create my own business and create a consulting practice specializing in digital transformation, specifically in the media industry. And so I ran my own company for 8 years. But during that time, I also had Caitlin and Max. So I had 3 young children. And I will tell you, having my own business did give me that flexibility that I really needed with 3 young children. The biggest career milestone, I think, came when I was offered an opportunity to go back to Avid after 9 years of being away. And this opportunity was to run Asia Pacific based out of Singapore. And it was completely out of the blue. So I wasn't looking for it in this case. I was pretty happy running my own business. And so my husband, Mitch, he was also at the peak of his career. And so when we got this offer, it was like, there's no way. Like, I had about a week, to consider the offer. And it's like, this is way too hard. We have 3 young kids. Max was only 2 at the time. So he was very young. And so we decided on the Monday, I'm going back. It's a firm no. And then the night before, we were sitting on the sofa and I turned to Mitch and we were watching 60 Minutes. So I remember even what we were watching that Sunday night. And I said, if we don't do this, if I don't do this, this is never going to happen again. Like, how often does an opportunity like this to live and work overseas happen, and a full relocation? And he says, you're right. And so the next day I signed the offer, and 90 days later we'd packed up our lives and moved to Singapore.
Wow.
And never looked back. And it wasn't as easy as that all sounds. There was personal sacrifices, hardships that come with that massive change of relocating to a foreign country. But this was also a huge move from a career standpoint, and what I considered a really big stretch. So I had to really trust the individuals giving me the opportunity, believing that I could do it. And, this is where I often coach and mentor individuals around taking risks. Ask yourself more often when you believe there is a risk, like, what's the worst that can happen here? And kind of imagine that worst thing and then work back from there. And more often than not, it's not as big a risk as you have built it up in your head to be. And I think taking risks and seizing opportunities has really been the motto for my career, for several roles after that as well. And that included a move back to Australia after 12 years. Actually, that was 12 years ago. But after, a long period of time away, and taking an opportunity to build a new business for Telstra. And it was a very large telecommunications company in Australia. And I'd not been in telecommunications, and I'm proud of the fact that that business is still successful today. And then 9 years ago, relocating back to the US with a company called Ericsson to lead their US sort of ICT strategy and consulting services practices. And so most of the last 15 years has really been that focus on either digital transformation or building new growth areas for businesses or adjacents, all with the foundation of leading customer experience initiatives and, of course, customer services. So that's really my full journey, to date.
Lot of different countries, a lot of different jobs, a lot of different types of jobs. But let's go back to when you made the decision, because I do think a lot of women struggle that they want to be the best person as a professional, as a wife, as a mom, and do all the things, the best they can do that. So that decision that you made, and I think it's a good point to talk about Mitch, your partner,
Yeah.
who supported you in that decision. And it sounded like what you commented on, he was at the peak of his career. So maybe talk a little bit. It is important that the younger generation hears about, both partners in a relationship probably have to work these days just because of the financial responsibilities and the economy. And so it is important to have someone as an equal partner supporting a woman just the same as, you support your partner. So maybe talk through a little bit more of how that conversation went and how was it such a equal decision, and not to bias us, but we are of an older, more
Mhm.
experienced group that's not
Yeah.
that's not a normal thing, that a woman's career takes their family overseas to a job, and there's a supportive role for their husband. So maybe talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that predominantly it comes with we we're just life partners. So, our partnering and then marriage, we always have this sense of adventure. So, as much as I will be the one that throws the practical in, my husband is very much sort of the dream big, let's do things. I kind of create some grounding and then we meet somewhere in the middle. So I think that's really how we both landed on the biggest decision is the first time you pack everything up and move. After that, it gets easier, quite frankly. I will say that there was an adjustment. So in our relationship, especially in that first year in Singapore, because he couldn't work. That was one of the conditions, is that I had the work permit. And in Singapore
Oh,
at the
okay.
time, they didn't extend that to partners or husbands or wives.
Mm,
And so that was very challenging time because I had to learn to relinquish control, because before that point, I ran my own business. I had lots of flexibility. I was the one that did do, the school activities, most of the pickups. I mean, I did have also, a nanny as well. And so when we moved to Singapore, we did have that, but it was still me having to let go, because that first year, I also traveled about, I think it was like 200 days that year,
wow.
because it was Asia Pacific. And so while based in Singapore, I had to fly all over Asia, and of course to headquarters back to the US. So it was challenging. So I don't want it to sound like we didn't have, our issues. But the one thing that remained is that we're on this adventure together, and that really was what has continued to ground us. I do think it's been fascinating over the years, because the assumption, whenever this comes up in conversation, of what brought you to the US, is that they look to Mitch and as if to say, oh, it must have been your work. And then he's the one who
Right.
quickly say, oh no, this is all
Yeah.
Kam. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and he does that with great pride, I would say, because the thing that I do want to touch on is that this notion that you can do it, you do it all and by yourself, you can't. It takes a village. And as I think the reality is that we do try to be, when we have kids, we try to be
Yeah.
super mums. And
Yep.
I will say that I still, with 3 adult children, I still try to be super mom. But it is so important that you you're going to drop a ball or two, and you have to be okay with that, and you
Right.
have to seek help from those around you, and you can have both. That's the thing. It's often, well, I
Yep.
feel like I can have one or the other. It's like you can, but you're not going to be
Yep.
perfect at both. And probably the harder one to live with is that I did miss activities at
Yep.
school. I did miss a couple of birthdays, but I also knew when I needed to balance things the other way. And sometimes career and work can't come first. There are things in your personal life that you need to take care of and take priority. So, my advice, I think, is that it is important to surround yourself, with support, support one way or another, whether it's paid or otherwise, that's,
So it is interesting because you have 3 adult
yeah,
children. So if you were to ask them today, what they think of their mom holistically as a mom and as a professional,
yeah.
you know, I think it's a good kind of little study that you did already, and your kids are grown up. And how did they turn out? What do they think of you? Do they respect you? Do they know and feel that you missed that one birthday or that one
Mm.
recital, right? Or do they feel in a really good place of where you are in your relationship with them? I think that's important for women to hear.
Yeah, we're a very tight-knit family. And I would say that it's different for each child. So, what do I mean by that? I think I'll speak to my middle child. So, Katie, she is 25, about to be 26. She, about 6 months ago, was promoted to be a general manager of a very large restaurant and a big corporate group, actually. And she's the youngest to make GM in their
Mm,
company history. She's very driven, and she's also has this innate ability with people and leadership. And I think what amazes me is that it's coming out in her much younger than it did in me. And she's having great success. And, we have conversations about leadership now. And for her, she has said, you're my role model. You know,
mm,
I, I and she is also with a partner that is so supportive of her. I mean, she being in hospitality, she works most
yep,
nights and she doesn't,
yep.
and she works weekends. So her days off during the week, and her partner, Matt, is incredibly proud and supportive. So she, I think, has looked for, can I say, a partner very
Hmm.
similar to her father in that regard. So that's sort of interesting. Our eldest son lives in Australia. He's actually engaged. He's about to get married next year. And he is very family orientated. So I wouldn't say that he's so much of a career person, but
Hmm.
the even though he's on the other side of the world, the closeness between the siblings and with us is really phenomenal because he decided to go to Australia to study, to go to university. In his mind, it was going to be, and it was cheaper to do that. So, and then he met his now fiance, so he's staying there. And so I think moving around the world, we've always put the emphasis on family and connection, if it's a phone call or a text, because there's that distance. And so I would say that from his perspective, being he and his siblings, when we moved countries, had to start all over again with friendships, and they really had each other. And so I would say this journey that my career has taken us on created that closeness. And then Max, he's still studying and he lives at home. So I still have Max the baby at home, and he's very driven. And I think that I'm not sure where his career is going to take him, but he's ambitious. He works hard. So all three kids have this incredible work ethic. So I also think, one thing I didn't mention in the case of Liam, his fiance, she's very career orientated, and he's the one
Yep.
saying, I'm going to stay at home. We'll have kids. And so I love how this is sort of playing out, I think, real time in our family right now as to how this journey has, I guess, what that impact in a good way has had on our family.
It sounds like there was a lot of resilience and a lot of adaptability that your kids learned at a very early age, which we both know is very important in everything you do in life. So learning that, like I think a lot of people are afraid, like, oh my gosh, I don't want to move because my kids are in school. Well, they'll go to a new school and they'll meet new friends and it'll be hard, but they'll get through it, right? And the more you expose them to adapt, I believe in a younger age allows them to build on that strength. And then probably in the larger life lessons that they're challenged with, they already have that skill set that maybe kids nowadays don't have as much as we should push them to be.
Yeah.
But I think it's also an example of your equal partnership, with Mitch, and you've created very good examples of what you can do, and there is no specific role for each person. It's
Right.
just kind of a blended effort, and
Exactly.
everyone's going to do the best that they can every day, and we'll figure it out. And there's no role assigned.
That's right.
And someone just picks up the pieces and move on. And I think your kids, the reason I asked that is for people to understand what they saw, what they learned, and now look at how they're developing all that into their lives. So congratulations. That's a
Thank you.
that's a huge accomplishment, especially as a working mom.
Thank you. I will say it wasn't all sunshine and roses.
Oh, it's not. It's not. It's not. But you look at the outcome, right? That I say you look at, and you make a good point. I say that all the time. The work-life balance doesn't exist. I agree with that. It's you have to do the best you can do every day, and each day you're prioritizing what your must-haves are for that day. And often, I talked about this on a previous podcast. Sometimes you're so emotionally in it, either at work or at home. I use the 5 rule.
Mm,
I said, what's your decision in the next 5 minutes? What's the impact?
yeah.
Then in the 5 hours, in the 5 weeks, in the 5 months, in the 5 years. And I kind of pull back a little bit. I'm like, okay, who am I going to impact if I don't do something, or if I do something, looking at that 5 rule?
Yeah.
And that has allowed me to pull back emotionally and say, okay, it's not about this one contract. It's about being here for this, kid event, whatever that may be, depending on how important that all is to them. So I think a lot of times we're so in it in
Mm,
that moment, but allow ourselves the grace to pull back and take a different view of it.
totally agree. I love that.
So let's go back to your journey. I want to go back to the career transitions you had. You have a very unique skill set because you do focus on customer service, but you've moved from different industries. So a lot of people, not just women, once they pick an industry, like I've been in healthcare, I've had different roles in healthcare, but I've stayed in healthcare, right? So, but you've transformed yourself and evolved to different industries, but using that same skill set. So can you walk us through a little bit of how you did that, and when you did make the change from one industry to the other? And even now the industry you're in is the auto industry, right?
Right.
Which is very customer service
Mhm.
friendly, but so different from how you started out in production. So maybe walk us through what that journey's been like, how you've done it, and is it really taking a risk every time you change, or do you feel like you have the confidence based on the skill set and characteristics you have?
Yeah, such a great question because I will say that has been a journey. So I had predominantly been in media and entertainment. And in 2012, I had the first opportunity to take a role with a company that wasn't in media and entertainment at all. In fact, it was really financial services. They had, technology customers, telco customers. So it was multiple industries. And that was such a great experience because I went for the role and I did get the role. And it was the first time that I was actually surprised because it was very interesting to me. But here's where, in my own journey, and happy to sort of talk about this a little later as well, I thought I only know media and entertainment. I'm not going to get this opportunity.
Mm,
But then I did. And reflection and obviously ongoing discussion once I was in the job, it was that I had built skills and experiences that really could transverse any industry. And sure, there were things I needed to learn, but this was a software company that served multiple industries. So I was never going to be the subject matter expert
yeah.
in any of those industries, but I had teams because we were structured by industry vertical and I was the umbrella over that, that I had individuals that knew those domains, and they, delivered those services. And so I think that it's really important when you're thinking about your career, how, looking at the skills and the experience that you have, how could you apply that to something, to a different industry? And so I will say that where I had a sort of a step forward and then a step sideways is that as much as I learned a lot, I miss media and entertainment. And so
Mm,
I sort of went back into media and entertainment, but via telecommunications initially. And so I realized that I probably had made the jump just a little too soon. So while great experience, I was kind of missing my people, if that makes sense.
mm,
So And many years later, and going back to Avid a couple of times actually, and back into the network and the people and the dynamics that I knew, when the opportunity with CDK came along, and I was presented with that, my first instinct was, if I go into another industry, am I going to miss media again? But this is like 10 years later.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I got into that opportunity, the more I could see I have skills, I have experience that can really help this company. I know nothing about automotive, like literally nothing other than buying a car. Although I will tell you that, when you're talking about dealership software, actually knowing the process of buying a car is a really important one. So that experience does matter. But I really didn't know the industry. So then I was offered the opportunity. It's been 3 years now, and I have to tell you, I haven't missed media and entertainment a single day. I have really loved having the confidence with the skills and the experience that I have, but now also learning something new. So it's been really wonderful to learn the dynamics of a totally different industry. But I will say that certainly in my area, when you're talking about customer services, whether it's professional services, consulting, customer care, support, learning services, actually, the problems are all the same. The things that
Yeah.
you're solving for are fundamentally all of the same problems. The nuance is, yes, there's unique, issues to that industry, but those are all things that you can fill that gap pretty quickly. So, I really, I'm thrilled that I took that leap of faith and said, let's try this again, and I've loved it so far.
So how does one get that confidence? You make it sound so simple, just taking the risk and going to a brand new industry and know nothing about, right? And so if you were talking to people
Oh,
listening to this that are contemplating making a leap to a different industry, or maybe they're not happy in the current
mm,
industry they're in, how do you gain that? And I don't know if it's confidence or if it's courage to take the risk. I think confidence is the output maybe,
yeah.
but either courage or confidence to take that risk. What would you tell someone how to do it or why to do it?
Yeah. So I think one of the key things that I learned along my career journey is that, and this comes to the listening part, when people offer you input or say or see something in you that you maybe don't see in yourself, too many times we pass that by. We just think
Yep.
that's a compliment. But actually, if someone's taking the time
Mm,
and they see a strength that you don't see, or even a weakness for that matter, because then we can work on our gaps, but certainly those strengths, listen to that. And
mhm.
particularly if people offer you an opportunity, I think it's really key to take a step back and say, if they didn't think I could do this, why would they offer me the
Right.
opportunity? Too often, of course, as women, we think, "Oh, I can't, like I don't have, all of those skills." But if someone's telling you that you do, like that's where you can gain some confidence is through that listening and taking that in. I also think that there is that comes back to, if you don't take some risk, there's very little gain. And, you have to take leaps of faith in your career that, again, if you're being offered the opportunity, um, then they're seeing something in you, that
Right.
says that you can do that. And so therefore the risk is actually probably a lot less than you are making it out to be. Um, and so, yeah, I think those are sort of the two things that I would say, and actually maybe a third, um, is you need to, like, your network is super important, and this again becomes that
Mm,
listening post. So if you are someone that is feeling maybe stuck, or maybe I'm getting bored with this, in your network there are going to be people who have also done very very similar, that haven't always stayed in the same industry, and use that network, ask questions, ask, what are the things that I need to have? What are the skills and the experience I need to have that will allow me to, move across, industries. And so I think there's probably some insight there as well. And looking for even getting those skills in the industry that you're in before you.
That's great advice. And again, going back to what you said earlier, is what's the worst thing that can happen, right? You don't get the job well, or you go back to the industry you're familiar with, but without taking that risk, you don't know what the gain can be, to your point, and you'll never know unless you take that opportunity. Just a quick question that I thought of when you were talking about when people give you feedback or compliments. Maybe this is a bias that I have, but I often hear that women have a really hard time taking a compliment. And oftentimes, when I give someone a compliment, I almost go back and I go a little bit deeper
Mm.
to give them more information about it so they don't brush it off. And I'm thinking, like, why is that? That when women have compliments, and maybe it's not just women, maybe it's men and women, but people sometimes they have a hard time hearing a compliment. And your advice, I think, is very solid to say go deeper on that compliment, especially if it's someone that you know can provide you an opportunity. But why do you think that is? Why do you think that we have such a hard time having someone give us a compliment that we're doing something well? And I'm also at fault for that. Trying to get better. It's something I'm working on, and I'm trying to do that too when I talk to other women to give them a compliment, to go deeper and make sure they understand that power that they have. But why do you think that is? Or do you even agree with
Yeah,
that?
I do agree with that wholeheartedly. And I do think that it exists more in women than men. Not to say that it's not there with men.
Mhm.
It is more often women. And I see this in the mentoring and the coaching that I do. A lot of it, though, I think, and this is not, in either gender, we have got experiences in our careers where you can't trust what someone
Mm.
saying to you. So I think that unfortunately, sort of feeds itself, sometimes, which is you thought you could trust what someone was saying to you and then you can't, and then until you can't. And so I think sometimes it's those experiences that we
Yep.
hold on to. But I would say that, if it's in a relationship and it's a trusted relationship and there's proof of that, you need to let that go and take the feedback, in all earnest. And I think we should always come from a place of people have got really good intent. But I was kind of answering the question, why do you think? I do think some of it is like previous experience
Mm.
feeds into it. But generally speaking, what I'm seeing and have seen, I'm coaching women, even if it's I have a couple of individuals who are at the start of their career journey, and I have women who are going into their executive, journey. And age doesn't have anything to do with this. But
Mm.
more often than not, if there's a role, we look at it, or women look at it and go, I only have
Mhm.
6 things here and I'm missing these 3 things. And they fixate on, I won't get it because I don't have those 3 things.
Yep.
And, really it's that imposter syndrome, right? And it's like, already out of the gate, it's like I don't tick every box. And as women, we feel like we have to tick every single box before we've got the right to kind of, like step into it. But more often than not, no one can tick, can't tick every single box.
Right.
And I will tell you that male counterparts going for that same role, they're like, oh yeah, I can do all of that. And they go in, they lead with so much more bravado, right? But
Agreed.
I have really made it my mission now to prepare my mentees to stretch themselves, and this is where that risk taking comes in, right? And you have to believe in yourself and your abilities. And it doesn't matter that you don't have everything that's there. So I think that that's where this listening, and when someone's
Yep.
trusting that compliment and going deeper. And I think for us, further down in our career journey, really helping women see this dynamic and changing the dynamic. And so while I think that certainly we've had progress, right, in terms of opportunities, and career progression. This piece, we still have a lot of work to do. So what I haven't worked out is it I don't know, the nature nurture piece, but I think I do believe we can change this dynamic if we're nurturing women on their career journey to say, I've got this, I can do this. It doesn't matter that I have everything, I will learn that. I will fill those gaps. So yeah.
That's great advice again. So just to go on something that you said, I think it's a very good point that listening, people in general, I believe, have to listen more and more intentfully. Even in a conversation you're having, people's brains are almost, especially women, they're probably thinking about, oh my gosh, what is this person thinking of me? Or how am I showing up? And they're probably self-analyzing in their brain so much of what they look like or sound like or how the other person's perceiving them that you're lacking the ability to intentfully listen to that other person that you're having that one-on-one conversation with. So I'm going to ask you of how do we become better listeners? Because I do believe if you forego, when I talk to people, I was at an event last night, I didn't know any of these people, and I really try to focus on that person. I forego everything that they're thinking of me. And I don't, honestly, at the end of the day, we're all human and no one cares that much about anyone. They care about themselves, right? So no one's going to sit there and say, oh my gosh, she doesn't sound smart or she doesn't sound this. They're trying to humanly engage with you and connect. But how do we as humans, not even just women, show up better and listen more to have better connection, to have more of those intentional conversations? Because at the end, hence why you're in customer experience, there is a better outcome for any industry, for any connection, for any professional or personal development we have. So how do we become better listeners?
That's such a great question, and I'm not sure I have a magic answer, but I think where my thinking is that all of us, we have our list of tasks, the things that we have to get done, in the day. And people in the roles, I think, again, you sort of assume they have competency, and all the right intent. But to actually get discretionary effort, to actually have people really care about an outcome and go that extra mile, that lives within connection. And so I've found that you it comes down to make that connection is a personal connection of some sort. What do you understand what motivates the person, what's going on in their lives. And, those meaningful connections are what then lead to, those kind of going the extra mile or, more of that discretionary effort. And the only way that you get that deeper connection is through listening, and having conversations. And the other thing that I truly believe that if we all stop for a second and remember that in order, like, success comes when you bring your whole self to work. You're not a machine. So as much as I can get through my tasks and I've got the competency to do all of that, I'm also a human being with all of these, like, good things happening, other pressures happening. And I know I don't just leave that at the door. So although I'm, getting through things and I've got the professionalism to do that, if something's going on with me, share, so it's a two-way street. So as much as it's listening, but you also have to, to make that human connection and that deeper connection, you also have to give something of yourself. So I think maybe it's like, yes, you need to be a good listener, but you also have to be a good sharer as well so that you can get to that level. So I don't think I've got a magic formula, but that's kind of, I think that's kind of how I see it, I guess.
I agree. There has to be a level of, if you expect someone to connect with you, you have to have a level of vulnerability that you're giving to them. And it has to start small because I think you need to trust the person to do that. But I agree with you. You have to be able to give a little bit of information to receive that same level. And then the next round, it goes higher. And once that trust escalates, then the more vulnerability comes through. I think that's a great point. And I do challenge, especially the younger generation women that are listening to this, I do challenge you to listen more. I do think social media has probably created this extra level of multitasking at all times, right? So put away the phone, put away the social media when you're talking to someone, especially in a professional environment, or you're at a college class, or you're networking. Be present, be intentional, and to listen more, because you don't know, what that person's going to say or what the opportunity they have for you.
Exactly. I
So I
love
think that's a
that.
really important
Yeah,
point.
that's very, very
Yeah.
true. I think that being intentional is key.
So, Cam, this conversation covered a lot of topics today. And we talked about resilience, adaptability, transformation. Your career journey, your personal journey has been, I think, a great example of exactly why we share these stories today. I'm going to ask you one last question of, any woman that's listening to this, looking to take a risk, or especially the younger generation, what advice would you give them in terms of embarking on their career journey and trying to figure out, how to show up of whomever they want to be in the multi roles that they have? What piece of advice would you give this audience?
So I probably have 3 pieces of advice. So the first would be, if I was giving advice to my younger self, it would be believe in your capabilities, much of what we've talked about today, and don't have a fear of failing. I will tell you that I had a crippling fear of failure for many, many, many years. And I wasted a lot of time being worried, overthinking, second guessing myself that I couldn't do it, I wasn't good enough. And I could have saved myself a lot of time, wasted energy, and honestly, negative, intrusive thoughts that would have me spiral. So I would say, just have confidence and don't fear of failure. We will all fail it's how you overcome that failure that matters. So this notion that you won't ever fail, like, take that out of your head and don't be scared of it. The second thing I would say is, like, pay it forward early. So I can't express how rewarding it's been for me to do mentoring and coaching. But even as an intern or a young professional starting out, there is another woman coming right up behind you that can benefit from your experience at any stage in your career journey. So my advice is, be that wind beneath somebody else's wings and help them soar and help them reach full potential. It's not something that you get to a point in your career and then you can give back. So I think that's, I wish I had started it much earlier. And I also think that I have been blessed to have amazing mentors like in my journey. So I think having someone at any stage of your career is super important. So I get such a great sense of accomplishment when I see my mentees succeed, in their goals and their development. And, I also know that when you are mentoring, that journey comes to an end at some point and you're handing the baton on to somebody else for a next stage of the career journey. And then the last thing is, I think, don't stop learning from others. And as I mentioned, sharing your experiences, and always set goals. It doesn't to always have your goals. And one of the things that I say is that if you don't know your own goal, then how can you expect a manager or else in your organization to know that? They can help you when you have really a clear sort of, at least, and I loved your 5 rule, right? Sometimes it doesn't have to be 5 years. It can just be in the next 5 months. But unless you're intentional about creating those goals, how can somebody else help you on that journey? So I think that's like super, super critical and has really helped me, in my career and on my journey.
Great advice. And what I'm hearing too is, don't be afraid to ask for help. There are women mentors, even in your professional career. Ask for help in your personal life. You said it takes a village to raise a family. So you don't have to do it yourself. We don't have to be perfect, and keep asking for help. And I agree with you. I think there's plenty of women out there that want to help other women. So keep asking the questions and pushing ourselves. But Kam, it's been a great conversation with you today. Great advice for our audience to hear for sure. Lots to learn. So I'm excited to have everyone hear Kam's story. And again, this is Root to Rising, a podcast that creates a platform for women to share their stories to help other women grow with their purpose. Thanks, Kam.
Thanks, Christine.